butterfly in the sky. I can go twice as high. Take a look, it's in a book, a reading rainbow.
Hello, ladies and Anthony. Um, this is my discussion of Harper Lee's To Go Set of Watchmen. I'm sorry I couldn't be there with you guys today. I had a prior engagement that kind of snuck up on me. I'm actually going to be in Vegas for a bachelor party. It'll probably look something like this. Yeah, so that might actually happen. So, anyways, the way I figure this might work is I know you guys are going to have a bunch of questions you're going to be asking each other, but I figure I'd throw some of my own questions into the mix. I'll give you some of my responses, hopefully move the conversation forward, and we can have a good discussion about this book. Okay. Okay, so let's get to the first question. I have my notes here that I've kind of written down. So I guess the first thing I want to know is what was your cognitive process when reading this novel? Um, as you read, could you separate the story itself from the historical significance of reading Harper Lee's second book? So my answer on this is when I opened up the book, I was super excited to read it. I got it on Amazon. I think I read it in about 2 days. Um, and as I was reading it, there were very slow moments in the book, but as I was reading, I couldn't help but get excited over the fact that I was reading Harper Lee's second book. And as I was reading it, I kept wanting to put more on it than was there, I think. I wanted to read it like an English professor who was then going to turn around and teach his or her class on Go Set a Watchman. And I wasn't just reading it, I think, to enjoy the story. I wasn't letting the story wash over me. So I thought it was an interesting process. Every time I picked up the book, I would start reading it and start thinking, wow, I'm reading the sequel to Kill a Mockingbird. Or, I mean, that can be discussed, I guess, sequel, prequel, one whole complete work. But I couldn't separate the historical occasion of reading this book from the actual story itself. It was kind of clouded by my cognitive process of trying to interpret the novel as I was reading it. Okay, so question number 2. Let's talk about the scope of the book. How does the scope and size of Lee's story in here, how does that compare with the scope, scale, and size of To Kill a Mockingbird? Okay, so my answer on this is a little bit trickier because obviously To Kill a Mockingbird, the timeline of it takes place over a couple of years, and it's this big overarching story. Even though it's this very intimate setting, it almost feels like it's epic journey into this young girl's childhood. Whereas To Go Set a Watchman is much more of a smaller story, both time wise and I think both theme wise and goal wise, as far as Harper Lee, what she wants to extend with this novel, that gets shrunk down as well. So it feels much more of a smaller scope. It also feels, in researching the novel, you find out that it looks like this might have been a first draft, or certainly all what we read in To Go Set a Watchman was originally going to be part of a larger To Kill a Mockingbird. And it really reads that way. It reads like a frame story that's been pulled out. And so now we're just getting this frame story strung together with a couple of, flashbacks that didn't quite make the cut for To Kill a Mockingbird. I was trying to explain this to someone the other day, and I said it would be like the movie A League of Their Own, right? It takes place 1940s baseball team, and the girls are playing, but then there's this frame story of the women as they're all older. Well, To Go Set a Watchman in some ways reminds me of if you were just to make a movie out of those old ladies visiting that museum. So the next question is, out of all the characters from To Kill a Mockingbird, who were you most excited to revisit as a character? And did that character's portrayal live up to your expectations? Okay, so this is I guess a little tricky because obviously we all want to see Atticus, and I think opening it up to talking about Atticus is opening it up to a larger conversation, maybe the main conversation to be had with this book. Um, uh, Characters that I was looking forward to see. I did want to see Scout and how she was dealing with womanhood, and I think that that was done really well. I found myself being really protective of Scout, especially in her romantic situations. It was kind of weird. It was like seeing someone make out with like your little sister. It just didn't feel right. But I thought that she held herself well as a character in this book. I was surprised by how big a role Uncle Jack played in this book. He was kind of a background character in To Kill a Mockingbird, but he really came through and got a lot of characterization in this book and became an important figure in the book, but also a controversial figure when we factor in the actually hitting Scout, echoing back to I think To Kill a Mockingbird when he first spanked her. Right, he was the first person to lay his hands on her, and we leave this story with him laying his hands on her again. And then I'll say, what was a character that I was excited to see again in a very touching way was Calpurnia. The scene with Calpurnia when Scout goes to visit her at her home, and how Calpurnia kind of just turns away from her. That was a really hard scene in the book to read, and it was definitely a place in the book where I had to stop after reading that and put it aside for a few hours to kind of process that and what that really means, not only to the character of Scout, but what that means. What's the bigger overall picture of that? All right, so next question is the tough question, right? It's are the claims of Atticus being racist in this novel are they founded? This is where it gets tricky. There were moments as we uncover this council that Atticus is on, where you really start to think like Scout is. You start to panic. At least I did. I start to panic. I start to I'd heard rumblings that Atticus was racist. Are we going to make him an outright racist in this? And I don't think it's as clear, black and white as that. I mean, he is obviously he is against how the South is being desegregated. But I think in his explanation to Scout at the end of the book, and also mixed in with Uncle Jack's explanation of the people of the South and the history of the South, I don't think we can call him a racist in the sense of the word that we want to use the word racist when we point and call someone a racist in a hurtful manner or in a way that's to discredit them. I don't think it discredits Atticus as a character, his way of thinking in this book. It's very aligned with the rational thinking that we expect from Atticus, and we know that Atticus has grew up in the South, and we know that he developed his moral compass at a very early age. That line from the book. I think it's on the back of the book. That Uncle Jack says about every man sets his own watchman in his conscience, to paraphrase. And Atticus has done this a long time ago. He did it very young, and he's trying to live by this moral code, but he's also trying to put in the realism, practicality as he sees it in the South at the time. So I don't take away from this novel. I don't leave it thinking that Atticus is a racist, but he is certainly not as I don't want to not the word to use. He's certainly not as um, deified as he is in To Kill a Mockingbird. Okay, so my last question is a simple one, but I think it has a larger answer. Um, I was a little intrepid about reading to Go Set a Watchman because of my love of To Kill a Mockingbird, and I have that's such an iconic book in my mind, and one of the things that really made me want to go and read literature. It's how many people has To Kill a Mockingbird started the love of literature for. So in I was really intrepid going into this book and reading it and wondering if it was going to cloud my judgment. So my question to you is, having now read Go Set a Watchman, would you want to unread this book? Okay, so I wouldn't unread this book. I think that, especially for me in my time in my life, it's actually a really kind of poetic way of viewing To Kill a Mockingbird. I think you can look at Go Set a Watchman as almost a manual on how to read To Kill a Mockingbird, meaning that when To Kill a Mockingbird comes out, this character of Atticus Finch becomes this deified character. We all set by him. You know, what would Atticus do? And he is the moral compass for American literature over the last 50 years, and someone we can look up to, and someone we can aspire to be. And so, a real hero in literature. And I think Scout comes into this, when we meet Scout in this novel, the lesson she learns, it's all about her father and how her father is a human, and how as you get older, your heroes, they're not less heroic, but they are less deified, if that makes any sense. And so for me, this book made me look back at To Kill a Mockingbird, and it was almost kind of saying, uh, take a look at this character of Atticus. You can respect him, you can aspire to live in ways that he does in certain extents, but also realize that he has flaws, that your heroes have flaws. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, we're not perfect human beings, but we all must kind of discover this on her own. And we're meeting Scout at a time in her life when she is learning this lesson, and she's really becoming her own watchman. She's becoming her own hero, and she's taking the best of Atticus and taking that with her, and then pulling in things that she's learned from New York. And I think in life that's what we do, right? We grow up, we set these standards on our heroes, we aspire to be them, but then at some point we look around and we realize that we are not our heroes, but we are a mix of the things we've learned from them, as well as the things that we've learned from um, our enemies, our environments, our way of living, and we come up with a great jambalaya of different characteristics. And I think that Go Set a Watchman, although the story is much smaller in scope, and that it is slower at points, I think that it is a good theme, and one that we don't maybe necessarily see too much in modern literature.
I can go anywhere, friends to know and ways to grow.